in a way that would be congruent with my ethical standards at the time, because this was before WikiLeaks. Now I obviously see what the way for sort of ethical journalism would be. But back then I didn't really think about it that way, and I went, well, I don't want to do that, and I don't know what I want to do, so I'm just gonna inhale information, and I'm gonna live, and I'm gonna see what happens, and maybe it leads me somewhere, and maybe it doesn't. And yeah, that's where it sort of led me. And the second question that you asked was
comics. Reading.
comics. Yeah. So that connected with how I figured out that I wanted to comics, because during that fateful night when I figured a lot of things out, I thought back and I thought, well, what can I do that will actually feel like it gives my life a meaning that isn't somehow based in what other people think of me? Or, like, I have to take responsibility for my life, and that means that I have to give it meaning, because life seems to be generally meaningless unless we actually imbue it with some sort of meaning. And I went, well, comic books are something that was always around me in some form, and I so often started feeling like I'm not alone through the process of reading comics, whether it would be something like The Invisibles and Transmetropolitan, or strange European comics that I don't even remember their names, that I read when I was 6 or 7, or something like Asterix, or plenty of other things. I was just like, yeah, these things, A, sometimes transported me into places where I needed to be so I could actually feel safe. B, sometimes they gave me enormous insights into human nature and human behavior. And sometimes they pointed me in the direction of other things that I wanted to learn, or other works of art. So when I approach comics now, that's how I approach them, and that's how I pretty much approach them from the beginning. I want to do the thing that comics as an art form do for me, for other people. Because I feel like it's all about really paying it forward, and art is about communication, that's what it is.
And now on that note, and you sort of said this before, that a lot of the work that you do is like specifically about either sort of dealing or confronting certain issues that you're going through, or that other sort of the culture as a whole is going through. And I wanted to sort of get your take on what Zero was for you specifically, with that in mind. It's just finished. We got Volume 4 here. Now that it's done and over with, in that context, what was Zero?
I'm still processing that, but and that's the thing. It changes so much as you go. Like, I could even look at Wild Children now, or change, and I could go, well, there are things that I thought immediately, but there are also things that now, years from, I see much clearer than before. With Zero, what I always do was that I wanted to work through, and I sort of wanted to dethrone the archetype of the greatness of a secret super spy agent sort of thing. Like, I watched James Bond movies, and I went, yeah, they're cool, but essentially what they're saying is that it's okay to murder people without really thinking about why you're killing them. Because he doesn't really. He usually just gets orders. And when he acts out an impulse that is not in order, it's usually revenge. And while I totally understand the need to sometimes genuinely react with violence, I think that there are cases when, if you're attacked, that's something that might be necessary in some cases, sadly. I don't believe that the main purpose of fiction now should be to tell people that it's okay to hurt other people with impunity. And so I went, well, that's damaging. How do I reverse engineer that, and how will it also feed into things that are very important for me personally? And the funny thing is, shortly after I made that decision to really dive into it, I started discovering a lot of very interesting things about my family, about my background, things that I didn't even realize, I didn't even know in some cases, and things that I'm still discovering. For example, I come from Czech Republic, and I come from pretty much the Czech-Polish border, or very close to the Czech-Polish border. which was under German occupation in the Second World War from 1938 until the end of the war. So you would get, it was a really horrifying time in plenty of different ways, and for both the people who were living there and who made compromises to live with the Germans, and for people who were German and didn't sometimes even know what exactly was going on, or for people who were Czech or Polish. So it was this massive, really, I'm not gonna swear because there were a few children around, but how to say that word without, I don't know, it was a tornado of a time for people, and the awareness of what the actual situation was not very clear, and a lot of damage happened through that. So some of the memories that I now understand better and that I've learned from like my grandparents who both lived there was like my grandmother being in a house that got bombed and having to be under the rubble for like 5 days before she got fished out by the Soviet army on the way back, and then essentially had to hope that the Soviets wouldn't rape her, because that's what the Soviet army was known for, apart from liberating everyone, which they also were doing. So it was again a case of a ridiculously complex issue. With my grandfather, I found out that he actually was a spy, and someone who ended up in uranium mines at least once because of starting a militia. So starting these things and watching how unresolved traumas that I didn't really have full access to, but could sort of sense it in my behavior. I could be like, there are impulses that don't feel like they're mine, and some of them are violent, and I have them under control, but they're creating frictions that are actually damaging to me or to others in ways that are not immediately visible, but they don't seem like things that are actually mine. So I went into the idea of genetic memory and into the idea of really digging into my own past through that, and Zero actually helped, because I wanted to figure out what that, I call it the bleak male rage, the violent impulse, is about, and how it connects, and what it could be. And the thing is, I don't know, but I feel like I worked out at least some little bits of it for myself, and it's helped me tremendously.
What do you think Zero meant for you, like professionally? Just the chance to work with so many artists, and it's your longest body of work at this point. And can you talk something about like both that collaborating with so many different artists and also managing so many different artists and like scheduling and like all of that?
Yeah. Most editors in comics who are supposedly professionals looked scared when they heard or when they talked to me about that. We're like, that's just not gonna work, and that's like career suicide. I love it. I can't even recall how many times I heard that something was a career suicide at this point. And I don't know, it doesn't seem like that's the case usually. It was wonderful for me professionally because I met majority of the team that I still work with, my main letterer, one of the main colorists that I work with, and my main designer all started with me on Zero. I worked with artists who, in many cases, well, I don't know, not in many, but probably like 25% of the artists did not have work previously published by a major publisher, and I managed to open up that space for them a little bit and give them that work and get them paid. And that alone was really helpful for me because I just realized that I can actually work within the community and I can do something good and pay it forward and at the same time do things that are very interesting for me personally. I wanted to challenge myself. I wanted to have to do single issue stories that would eventually fit into something larger, and I had to work with a different artist every issue because that way I would have to learn how to write for every single kind of a different artist. I mean, there's more kinds, every person is their own kind, but 18 artists in the span of 2.5 years are a solid workout on top of all the other work that I was doing. So it was a challenge, but I love a good challenge. and I feel stronger for it. That's the thing. Sometimes it was completely crazy, and I'm really glad that I managed it the way I managed it, because except for maybe 2 or 3 issues, things were really, really smoothly considering everything.
What does that mean when you say you had to write differently for each artist, like logistically or concretely?
To me, each script is a love letter to the artist that I'm working with. And that means that I have to study their style. I have to talk with them and I have to ask them, how do you want to work? What's your ideal way to work? I have to merge that with the way I want to work. And I have to create a space that is not a compromise, because I don't really believe that compromise is something that usually serves well anything, including art. But I had to find a space that would be good for both of us at the same time. And I have to be in love with the artist and with the work, because otherwise I'm not going to put my passion into it, and if I don't, then it's going to fall flat, and no one's going to, my belief is no one's going to actually connect with it when they read it, because I feel that the significance of the work starts with putting whatever is alive in me into the work. Yeah.
So, one of the things I wanted to ask you about is that you just sort of put yourself out there, calling specifically for more space for creators of color and transgender creators. And I just wanted to sort of get a little bit more out of you about that. Your thoughts on it, also your experiences. I know that Marvel wanted you to take a book that had most of their, or a company wanted you to take a book. With most of
Yeah,
their-
it was a company. I never
company.
specifically said which company.
A
it
company
was.
wanted you to take a book with most of their characters of color, and you turned it down. Tell us a little bit about both of those.
Yeah. First of all, I would also, after having a really illuminating discussion on Twitter yesterday, I would also add disabled creators to that, which that's a sphere that I have to learn more about. But I completely understand why creators would be asking for that. So I feel like that's important to just add, even though I didn't add it in the initial interview, because really it's not something I thought about that much. And I'm grateful for that feedback, because it helps me see the world in a clearer way. And that's really, to me, what it is about. That's what fiction and what doing most things in life for me are about. All of my fiction is really concerned with perception. And so is my daily life. I want to see clearly, and part of that is being within the community or the communities that I work with and that I interact with daily, and being able to use my platform to do good without trying to save people, because I don't believe that anyone needs saving. I believe that people can use help, though, sometimes. And I feel that opening up spaces and offering help and letting people decide whether they want to take it or and then build their own thing is really important. And seeing most creators and seeing most of the comics industry really be quiet on that, except for ways in which diversity sells now, which is mainly the characters, which then gets reflected when you see characters of color, usually written by straight white guys. It's something I don't want to participate in. I don't feel that that's my space. It's one thing when it's for a major company that owns the character and can start up new people and can find creators who might have things to say that white guys might not necessarily have. That to me seems really important. And it seems important to me that we should make more space for that. That includes taking, not taking gigs in some cases. So I did that a few times. I probably did it like 3 times. I don't want to make a big fuss about it. I do think it's important because I want other creators who are white to think about that, and I want them to actually have to acknowledge that in their decision making, because it's really easy to close their eyes in front of it. And I see so many people close their eyes in front of things in comics industry that are complete dirt, that it makes me angry. I mean, it doesn't make me angry. I make myself angry, but I feel like there's a good reason for it, because I heard this thing that completely stunned me one of the times when I was offered to write a character of color. And that was, well, we would love to have a, black creator on this, but we don't really know that many. And I just went, I just gave them a few names, and I just was like, no. Nowadays, I would just send them the actual database that Mari Naomi did that has all the creators. I think that's going to be my standard answer for all. But I just went, that's how is that attitude even possible? Which obviously is incredibly unrealistic, because yes, we live in a country that's deeply torn apart, and one doesn't really have to be a genius to see that racism lives under a slightly different name, which is pretty much just prison industrial complex. So when people try to pretend that those things don't happen, that a black person usually doesn't get shot every few days by a cop, and then it gets somehow nicely pushed aside. Those things happen, they're real, and to not speak about injustice, to me, equals violence.
At college at CCA, I actually go there, and it's a summer program, and we're talking about diversity, and we've been reading these books, and I'm actually on my 3rd page of the book. We're gonna make it into a big one, and I wanted to say, is Image Comics a good place to publish and make comics at?
As far as I'm concerned, it's the best place to be at, because since the beginning, they have given me nothing but absolute support in whatever I wanted to make creatively. They have the best deal in comics if you're willing to work for it, which is you own 100% of what you make, and if the comic sells well, then you're seeing a much larger percentage of the sales, which is also very important. They've never tried to censor me in my life, not even once. And I mean, if there's a creator in mainstream comics who could get censored easily, it's probably me. And I'm proud to call most people their friends, or people that I genuinely like and believe in. And I've never really seen that in any other company. There are various ways in which no other company ever really worked for me that well. And I think the difference with Image for me is that I always feel that comics and making comics with them is really the first thing that I get from them. That it's people who are genuinely enthusiastic and want to make good stuff. So yeah, I would, absolutely.
Thank you.
So you said earlier that you just met Eric Stevenson. I mean, how did you get connected with Image then?
Well, I found out where he lived. No, please don't do that. That I might not work at Image anymore if anyone tried that. Or with Image. What happened is I decided to make comics sometime in late 2008 and moved to LA in late 2009, and then spent a few years trying to figure it out. And Image was always a place that I didn't want to go to because they didn't pay their artists. And my decision with my first book was that I didn't really have enough money to pay the artist, but I wanted to make a deal where even if I didn't get paid anything, because I could take it, the artist, who will spend radically different amount of time on writing the book, should get paid. Which thankfully meant that most of possible deals that I had with other publishers tanked because they didn't want to pay, or because they wanted, too much of a percentage of the book. And I was sort of feeling pretty unhappy about it. And I was contemplating whether working in comics was even the thing that really made sense for me. And then I decided with some of the last money that I had that I'm gonna go to the Emerald City Comic Con in Seattle. And I had this maybe 50-page folder of comic book pitches, pages that I did with artists who were very well established in some cases already. And I showed it to Joe Keating, who writes Shudder at Image now, who used to, even before we met, used to work at Image PR. And Joe looked at the stuff and he just grabbed me and he just went, I have to introduce you to someone. And brought me over to Eric and said, you two should meet and you two should talk about doing something at Image. And I showed Eric what I wanted to do. I showed him about 3 or 4 pitches and he just went, let's do 2 and see what happens. And I just went, okay, that's fine. I'll do that. So it was easy once it actually happened. But before then, it was incredibly hard. It was a constant questioning of, am I insane by saying no to offers? Or am I actually really doing the right thing here by believing that the right thing will come when it happens? I still don't know. I still have that same problem nowadays when I do something similar. So, you never really know. And I'm not saying that that has to work for everyone, but it sure worked for me.
So you resisted going to Image because of they don't pay the artists. So how did you end up resolving that?
Eric introduced me to an artist who was really happy about their deal. He just went, hey, here's Riley, who was like tabling literally next to us as we were talking. He was like, you two might want to do something together. He's already working at Image. And I just went, you know what, I guess that's okay. If he's already working in that system and it's fine for him and it's working out for him, then I don't have that problem. Yeah.
So,
Just, going back to this sort of like question about taking jobs and in diversity, you did take the job for writing the Iron Patriot. And just from like what I've heard you talk about in the past is that you had reservations and that was difficult. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because Iron Patriot is a character of color, and I knew that I ended up just looking back in like 2013, and I wanted to do it because I felt that there were things that I wanted to genuinely explore in the fiction, and I wanted to work through some things, and I saw a way to do that, and at the same time educate myself, and at the same time be really, really careful about the actual work. And I feel that I did a decent job, but I just didn't see the point of doing that again within some sort of a company that would own the character, because there were definitely things that were pretty racially charged that I wanted to do that didn't go through. And I don't think they necessarily made the comic worse per se, but they made it blander. So I guess they made it worse actually, yeah. It wasn't anything, it wasn't massive censorship or anything like that, but it was definitely one of those cases where I was like, well, if I'm ever going to write a character of color, and I will because it just has to reflect my world, I'm not interested in writing white people exclusively. First of all, I have to keep that approach of make sure that you are writing from a position of knowing that you will never know what it feels like to be black, but doing the best possible focusing on it as much as you really can, focusing on giving people an experience that doesn't make me feel like I should quit comics forever, essentially. Like, if there is a serious level of responsibility in any sort of representation. Whether you're a person of color, any color, whether you're writing a character that's female, especially in comics, which has a massive history of being incredibly misogynist. All those things combined, it's always like, yeah, it's a challenge, but is it a worthy challenge? Is it something that I need to do in order to actually feel right? Otherwise I wouldn't do the comic. Like, did the character that came to me when I was thinking about this comic they're not always white. They can be. They would say something horrible about me, in fact, if they were, you know. So it's never easy, but it's never easy for me to write any character necessarily. Each one of them is a person. I try not to see characters as characters because that gives this sort of like a two-dimensional blanket that makes me feel like I'm just playing around and not doing something important. And to me, making fiction and making art is really, really important. It's every single line, everything should count, and it's all inevitably political. So I should be really careful about what I do and how I do it.
Did you get the same sort of censorship with Secret Avengers? Because it seems very much not censored.
No, not really, no. I mean, the only thing that they didn't let me do with Secret Avengers was that I wanted to turn Coulson gay initiative. Well, gay. I wanted to turn him bisexual, actually. Him and Nick Fury Jr. were falling down from space, and Coulson thought that they would die in like next 5 or 10 minutes. So he essentially confessed that he's in love with Nick Fury Jr. And Nick Fury Jr. had strange feelings about it. Wasn't quite sure, but also was sort of attracted to him. And I turned that script in to Marvel without telling them about it, because it was just a case of just like going, wow, that's a great scene. That's totally something I want to see in comics. Like that's awesome. And I wonder what the faces were, since they had to process that they were reading that. That was like taking one of their marquee characters. And I'm really sad that that didn't go through, because I wish it did. I think it would have made a lot of sense for the character overall. And I can't really quite explain why, but it just felt like something that could have worked quite well. And if they make him bi in 5 years, I'm gonna expect my own.
You said that you had like a book of 50 pitches that you, or
Oh, like 50 pages.
50
It was for like 10
pages.
pages.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And that they pointed
Don't
at
make
two.
50 pitches, bro.
And yeah, but they found 2 things that they liked. That they said do this, do this.
You know, I would like to think that Eric liked every single thing that was in there. And the thing is, he actually might have. He didn't even. I don't think he even had like went through all of them. It was very much a case of. I think what helped was that. In some cases, there were like artists who were attached that you already knew or like saw their work before, and saw that they were taking a chance on me, and that meant that considering I had nothing published, that must have meant something. But he just mainly responded to the stories. He just responded to what I was telling him. You know, I was definitely passionate about it, and I wasn't pitching things that he's heard 10 times before, and I think that really made a difference. It was wonderful to suddenly go, wow, this person wants to publish my comics, and he actually gets what I'm talking about. I have not experienced that in 2 years of pitching. I usually hoped I was, but I wasn't.
How long do you think it was between when you like started doing pitching, seriously trying to get into the industry, and when Image picked you up?
About 3 years. About 3 years, and one of the phrases that I never used because I don't really like the way that phrase works is breaking into comics, because it instantly conjures this place that people lock up at night so you can't get in, you know, and usually also during the day. And the problem is it's actually pretty true. And I think it's becoming less and less so now, but we still have ways to go really on that in plenty of different ways. Yeah, so about 3 years.
And the work that you had done that you mentioned in this portfolio, like the pieces with artists, how did those come about? What was your connection with those artists that you put stuff together?
Oh, there was not one single way. It was a matter of just chaotically searching in every way possible and learning, reading how other writers met with their artists, trying to figure out if I can somewhat replicate that, approaching artists on the internet, approaching artists at Comic-Cons, making sure that whatever I gave them was clear and concise and my best work, never being obnoxious or expecting anything from anyone pretty much. Yeah, things like that. I think that those decisions helped eventually, get me where I wanted to go. But it was a long process of not knowing what works and doing it anyway, and going, well, if I fail, then at least I know that this might not be the way, but that means that I'll know where to focus more.
Right.
I think I read that you were done with Marvel Comics. Is that true?
Well, if I wasn't before doing this, then I probably am now. Yeah. It wasn't a case of, me freaking out or them freaking out or anything. It was much more of a case of they wanted to work with me more and I wanted to work with them more, but at the same time, I imagined better ways to spend my time, even though ultimately right now they might mean less money and less exposure, because doing something in Marvel Comics at this point for me would be something that would satisfy me for maybe, 75%. But doing something at Image is 100. And do I want to stand for something that's good work, or within certain constrictions, or do I want to stand for doing my art and sort of potentially risking everything, but also doing something that I completely believe in? And it was just a case of not wanting to go the standard route, where with comics writers you often get this sort of approach where they do a thing or two at Image, maybe keep one series there, they go to Marvel or DC, they do plenty things there, they get the readership, and then they drag it back over. And they drag it back over to their youth comics at Image. And to me, I'm not criticizing those writers because I don't feel like it's my place to criticize that. But for me personally, that behavior would be false, because I don't want to get readership that way. I want to get readership through the actual books. In other words, I don't want to get fans, I want to get readers. I want to have people who genuinely interact with me and don't come to try my new comic because my name was plastered on Batman or Captain America for 5 years. And again, I'm not criticizing anyone who does that. It's just not something that felt right for me, because I don't believe